Alright, today we're going to be showing you installation of a 9,000 pound 2-post lift. And before we get started, we're going to show you a list of, show you some of the tools that you're going to need. You're going to need 2 ladders that'll go at least 8 feet tall. You're going to need a hammer drill, rotary hammer with a 3/4 inch bit. You're going to need some miscellaneous hand tools, Allen wrenches, channel locks, adjustable wrenches, all the way up to about 1 1/8 inches. You're going to need a torque wrench, you're going to need a level, a chalk line, pipe dope, tape measure, oil, hydraulic oil, and an extension cord. Don't forget a level, a torque wrench, miscellaneous wrenches, hammer drill, 3/4 bit, and at least 2 8-foot ladders on this particular application. Shortly we'll get started on the installation. You receive your lift, this is what it's going to look like. Remember, this lift is about 10 feet long, 2 feet wide, 3 feet tall, and weighs 1,500 pounds when it's delivered to you. If you pick it up, you can put it in the back of a pickup bed, or a trailer works well. You have bubble wrap wrapped around there. You will need a forklift if you're loading it into or out of a semi. Once you receive like this, we unbolt the sides and start assembly of the unit. Alright, here's your lift once it's unbolted from the packaging as it comes. You have one mast, which is your power mast, and you'll know that because it has the mount for the motor on there. Your other mast is not the power mast because it doesn't have the little bracket. Now you see your asymmetric arms here. What really that means is all 4 arms, not all 4, but there are 2 longs and 2 shorts. A symmetric lift would be 2 arms are maybe 48, 2 more arms are 48, whatever that may be. On an asymmetric lift, you may have 2 arms that are 48 and 2 that are 28. It just really depends on whether you have symmetric, which means arms are the same, or asymmetric, which means arms are different. And when you look at your mast on this particular unit, it has an extension that is, when it's shipped, it's stored inside the lift. When you get ready to bolt it together, you will pull that out, flip it around, and bolt it to the mast before you stand it up. Now we're getting ready to get our floor set up so we can figure out where the lift has to go. First, we've checked our ceiling to be sure we have sufficient height. On this particular lift, you need a minimum of 11 feet 10 inches from the concrete to the top of the lift. 11 feet 10 inches. Now, in setting this one up, we wanted to be sure we were at least 12 inches from any stress relief or cuts in the concrete or any broken concrete. So we came over 12 inches from the edge of our relief line or expansion joint, and we've got our mark where our mast is going to go. Shortly we're going to run a chalk line, and so we have our straight line, and I'll film that in just a second. Okay, here's our chalk line, which goes from side to side. We make that about 150 inches just so we have some extra. Here's our starting corner for our post with our power pack on it with our hydraulic motor. We'll be setting that and next. Alright, now we've got our power post, which is the post where your hydraulic motor is going to be bolted to. We have that setting in place, and it is level and plumb. Now we're going to start drilling the 5 holes, 3/4 inch concrete bit, and start setting our anchors. And you want to make sure you use your shims or flat washers if you have to be sure the base plate is bolted securely to the ground. Alright, now we're showing the post with our power bolted to the ground. Notice some shims under there. Could be your concrete is level, but your post, when they weld it, may have tweaked a little bit. So you want to be sure you use those shims so it's secured to the floor. You may have a little gap, so use the shims to take up that gap or level it out. And remember, above the bolt head, you only want no more than about 1.5 or 2 inches above that nut. It needs to be properly secured in the cement, so you want to be sure that those are sticking above. I usually try to get about the distance of the nut. That way you want to be sure it's got enough grip into the concrete. If you tighten it up and it raises too high, you may try loosening it, driving it back in, and tightening it back up. Now you'll see right now we have both the posts set. They are not bolted to the ground, but one post is. We've got our extension up, and we're now installing the cross piece. You set your power post first, set your other post in place, bolt your power post to the ground, install your cross beam, and after you have that installed, you bolt the last piece to the ground. Alright, this is for our hydraulic hookup. Doesn't really matter if this is a 210 or 220 or a 110 volt pump. They're all going to come with a standard fitting like you see with the pipe cap. And then that will remove. It takes a 7/8 wrench to remove that. You screw that all the way out, and then you screw in your adapter fitting. Remember, this fitting always goes in first. It's a male-female adapter. You'll put a little pipe dope on the end of the threads, in the direction of the threads, following the direction of the threads, and then you'll screw that fitting directly into the pump. It should go in very easily with just your fingers. You screw it in as far as it'll go, and I mean as far as it'll go, and then you use a 7/8 wrench and tighten it up. There again, you're going to tighten it to probably about 75 foot-pounds. You want it nice and tight, but you don't want to break the fitting off. When you have that, when you're satisfied with how tight that is, then tighten up the jam nut that tightens up the O-ring next to the cylinder. If you don't do it this way and you screw the fitting directly in, or you don't put some pipe dope, pipe sealant on there, you're almost guaranteed a leak. And when this leaks, it'll look like the cylinder or something else is leaking and it's just running down. So you'll want to make sure that's nice and tight and secure. Now on this particular lift, this is an AF lift, which means, an AC lift I mean, which means we have our hoses running above and down. So on this one you use a T-fitting, and this T-fitting, you'll put a little pipe dope on it, there again in the direction of the threads, and you'll screw it into the adapter that you have already installed and secured. So you're going to tighten this fitting up, there again make it very secure, and tighten up your jam nut, and that will almost guarantee no leaks. If this is an AF lift, meaning your cables run below the lift, then this will just be a 90-degree fitting and branch off at the cylinder at the bottom. So right now we're just tightening that up. Once we're positive that that is secure like it needs to be, and it doesn't have to be straight up and down, you just want the fitting tight. Once it's good and tight, then you want to tighten up your jam nut, which tightens up an O-ring, and that should secure it for any further leakage. Make sure that's nice and tight. Once you have that nice and tight, you're going to connect your hose that goes to the opposite side, which runs up and over on this lift, and to the hose that goes to the cylinder on the operator or power side of the lift. Do not use pipe dope on these fittings. This is a 45-degree fitting, so this is just fitting to fitting. No pipe dope, no Teflon tape, just tighten it securely. And while we're on the subject, at the bottom of your cylinders, at the bottom of your post, there's a 90-degree fitting and an extension fitting that's about probably 4 or 5 inches long. Before you connect your hose to here, be sure that that pipe that screws directly into the cylinder is tight, and the fitting is tight into that piece of pipe. You need to make sure this is very tight. If you don't get that tight, then that's going to leak, and it's going to look like the cylinder is leaking. So remember, there's a plug on the opposite side. Be sure that's tight. There's a piece of pipe that's probably 3 or 4 inches long. You need to make sure that is tight into the cylinder, and tighten your elbow, your 90-degree, or your T, whichever you have for your lift. Make sure that that's good and tight, and then you'll be ready for your test your hydraulics. Okay, we have our motor wired. It's 220 volt. The motor calls for 15 amp. The breaker should be 25 according to the instructions. So 220 volt, 25 amp breaker will be fine. You're going to end up putting, depending upon the lift that you have, 2 to 5 gallons of hydraulic fluid to fill the plastic reservoir. Most lifts take about 3 gallons. But when you're buying hydraulic fluid, you might as well buy a 5. 3 is going to cost you about the same as a 5 gallon. You use AW32 or 46. A lightweight hydraulic oil. You can use transmission fluids. They're a little more liquidy. They do work better in cold applications, but transmission fluid is $6 or $7 a quart. Hydraulic fluid is about $10 a gallon, so it saves you a lot of money if you're using hydraulic fluid. Now we're going to take a look at running our cables and being sure those are in the right locations. If you call us up and you say, hey, my cable's too long, hey, my cable's too short, you didn't put the cable in there right. Plain and simple. Be sure it's routed correctly on all the pulleys, and the cable will be correctly. We've never had an incorrect cable. Notice how the 2 cables run up, run across the pulley, go across the cross beam. Inside that cross beam is 2 cables and a hose. They drop over those pulleys, come down, and connect, which lifts the far side post. Here's your cylinder, and if you look closely, you'll see the little pipe cap, pipe nut plug that's right there. Make sure that is tight before you put any hydraulic fluid in the system to prevent any future leaks. Here is your cable. This is a 2-point release system, which means one point of release is at the pump. The other point of release is on the opposite side, pulled by this cable. So before this lift will come down, you will come over and simply pull on that cable. That will release the locking mechanism and allow the lift to go down. Every time it goes down, it resets itself, so it will once again click as you're going up. And you want to be sure both sides are clicking in the safety at the same time. You do need to adjust this periodically, because especially when the lift is new, the cables will stretch and get dialed into where they need to be. So you want to be sure that that is adjusted correctly. Now what we do up here, what we've learned is this back cable on the left, you want to be sure you guide that through this hole all the way down your tube and come out the bottom, and then put your double nuts on there and be sure they're tight, and then pull the cable back up, and then it's going to run over to the other side, and you're going to do the same thing. So you're going to take this cable, run it all the way down through the bottom, double nut it, and then pull it back up through. And then all of your adjusting to be sure you're even between side to side is done with this nut and this cable here. When you install this cable, you always want to make sure before you double nut that 2 to 3 threads are hanging out past the end of those 2 nuts. And that's all you're going to need. 2 to 3 threads, lock that down, and all of your adjustment will be done with this nut on this side and this nut on the other side. Start off with 2 to 3 threads, and your goal is to have each side even, not necessarily level, but even, and we'll show you how to measure and correct that and adjust that here momentarily. Alright, now we've got the lift virtually completed here, bolted to the ground, and now we're just looking it over. Now on the lift, what you need to be careful of is the adjustment. Okay, on the lift, what you need to be careful of is the adjustment of the outriggers. You need to be sure they're even on both sides, so your safety mechanism locks in at the same time on both. So you're going to need to make sure your cables are reasonably taut on both sides, on all 4 cables. You're going to pull the cable. You want about a 1/2 inch of play in there. Anything more than that, you want to tighten that up a little bit. And you do that by the adjustments that you see in here. Loosening and tightening. Now, we've discovered the very best way to adjust these is to let the lift all the way down. Alright, now what we've discovered after many installations is the arms need to be all the way down, so the yellow is touching the blue base on both sides. And then adjust your tension on your cables so all the cables have a similar tension. You do need a little bit of play, like a 1/2 inch or so on play on all 4 cables. What you want to do here is tighten the loose one slightly while watching the arms so they do not lift. When the arm starts to lift, stop. That's when your tension is going to be as close as you're going to get it. And you will have to adjust the back one and the front one. This can be a little tedious, but you can get it. It's not difficult, it's just time consuming. When we adjust those, we usually raise it off the floor 2 to 3 feet and come underneath with a ratchet and a long extension and a socket to loosen and tighten the back cable. And then let it all the way down and check it for tension again. Do not check it for tension when it's being raised or lowered. Only check the tension when it is at the bottom of its travel and you've confirmed both of your arms are at the bottom of the post where they sit. Alright, let's take a look at the safety cable running across. It's only about a little 1/8 inch wire cable that's going to come down and connect to the safety switch on overhead lifts on the hydraulic cylinder. Now, when you put a car on here, you raise it up, it's going to put tension on that wire and pull the safety, and it will not work. So if you're ever wondering why your lift is not raising up, the first thing is check that safety switch to be sure it has not tripped. If it has, push it back down and you'd be ready to go again. Alright, now we're just going to take one final look at the Titan 9000 AC lift before we sign off today. Here's the lift completed and installed on a 4-inch concrete slab. This uses the symmetrical columns, which means they face each other squarely, and the asymmetrical arms, which means the front arms are shorter than the longer arms. A few points of interest are bolting this to the ground. The head of the top of the bolt, the threaded part, should not be sticking more than about 1 inch to 2 inches above the nut. Any more than that and you're not getting correct penetration into the concrete slab. So be sure you have those driven in and locked down to about 150 foot-pounds. Storage of your adapters are in the pinholes here. Hydraulic hose comes up, goes over, and over to the other side through the tray above. Now be sure when you're putting these bolts through and connecting this together, the head of the bolt is to the inside of the tray and the extra threads are to the outside. That way, as your cables run through there, they will not rub on the bolt and cause wear and tear on the cables. Bolts on this should be bolted from the inside, nut on the outside. And you can see your safety wire running from left to right, or right to left, depending on how you have your lift set up. And that does need to hang a little bit, so as the vehicle comes up and hits that wire, it trips the switch on top of the motor and stops it, so it does not run the car into the ceiling or the crossbeam above. Take a look at your arms. The rear arm is longer, the front arm is shorter, so that makes those asymmetrical. Now take a look at your locking mechanism for the arm. You have to make sure that the teeth on this align to the teeth on the arm, so as the vehicle is up and you pushed against it, the arm can't swing, it's locked in. As the lift comes down, the arm will leave the gear mesh will not be happening, and when you're not using them, set it up on top of there. Once again, when the lift goes down, that will disengage, so you can move the arms. When it goes up, be sure you lock it into place when you're there so the arms won't move. Your cables are right here. What you want to make sure is you have an equal amount of tension on all 4 cables. So you should be able to pull that and pull that to you maybe 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. Just make sure all 4 of those are equal. Those are not to raise or lower the lift. Those are used as a safety precaution in case the cylinder will fail. The cables will hold it, and your locking mechanism will prevent that from falling down and hurting anyone. So be sure to have those cables snug on all 4 cables. And that is adjusted by your stem and your nuts, and the stem and the nuts on the other side. Those are double nutted. They don't have to be really tight. Just make sure they're secure. It uses a leaf chain and a cylinder to raise and lower your carriage. This is the Titan 9000 AC, which means it's a clear floor, nothing running in between the mast on the floor. That way it's clear, like for a transmission jack, something you're not stepping on, and then you'll be fine. Now the motor is connected like this. We have power coming down, 220 volt, 25 amp circuit. Goes through your push button, and there's your safety mechanism. As something hits the top, it'll pull this and shut that off so the lift won't move. If for some reason you push the green button and your lift doesn't go up and down, come in and push this button. It's usually just tripped by the weight of the cord. Here's your fitting. You want to make sure you use the adapter fitting. Screws in first, and then your fitting. If you're using the AC lift, this will be a T fitting. If it's an AF lift, meaning there's a floor plate, this will just have a 90 on there, just an elbow. Make sure you use a little pipe dope on that. Tighten them in as tight as they'll tighten, and then run your jam nut and your O-ring in to secure that. Your container is going to carry 2 to 3, maybe 4 gallons of oil, depending upon what lift you have. We usually recommend starting off with 5 gallons, and that way you'll have plenty in case you develop a leak or something. But minimum of 2 and a maximum of 5, depending upon what lift that you have. Once again, this is the Titan 9000 AC, and we install, deliver, repair parts. Anything you need, give us a call. We also have 4-post lifts, motorcycle lifts, jack stands, transmission jacks, tire balancers and wheel changers, and sandblast cabinets. Anything you need for your shop, give us a call. Thanks.